It's time, Fort Wayne. Your sports, your station. It's the Sports Rush with Brett Rump. Covering all the topics that hit a nerve here in the Summit City.
Clark, 11 yards, touchdown.
Only on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Now here's your host, Brett Rump.
The greatest, most interesting, most important person of all time.
You are incredible. Over the point.
Yeah, well, you're half right.
This is amateur hour.
This is going to be huge.
I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just when I think you've said the stupidest thing ever, you keep talking.
I think that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
That boy ain't right.
The simplest way to put it, I have problems.
Welcome to the alleged show.
What kind of magic is automatic? I feel like dancing. I feel like dancing.
Time to take you home on a Monday. We got one down, 4 to go with this cold work week. You know, this cold's going to stick around primarily until Friday morning, and then maybe a little warmer Friday afternoon. The weekend right now looks like the next relief we get from this polar vortex. It's cold, man. It was cold this morning.
Oh, yeah. Chilly.
Yeah, got to put an extra log on the fire, and I don't even have a fireplace.
I would hope you don't.
Landlord gets a little upset with me.
Yeah.
260-447-8500. The Parkview Sports Medicine text line, 260-447-8500. Also, we are video streaming the show today. If you can't catch it live, you can always come back and watch it later and see what it looks like in the studio as we do the Sports Rush each and every day. It's at facebook.com/1380 The Fan. Over the weekend, Saturday, busy day with girls high school basketball regional action. We had, 3 teams that went in with chances to advance in 4A, and only one survived, and that's because we adopted Warsaw into our market.
We did that for football, too.
Yeah, we did it for football. As long as they got good teams, we'll keep claiming them in our market.
Welcome back.
They're really more of the TV market than the radio market, but Warsaw gets a win over South Bend, Washington, 53-43. So Warsaw is on to the Frankfurt semi-state. They'll take on the team that knocked off Snyder, the McCutcheon, whatever they are. What is McCutcheon?
I don't know. I'll find out for you.
I watched that whole game. You'd think I could remember.
We don't worry about the enemies.
At 59, I'd have remembered that.
They're the Mavericks.
That's right. They're the Mavericks. Sounds so obvious to me now.
Hey, okay, so they're the Mavericks, but I'm looking at the picture of their mascot, and it's a bull. So
Maverick the Bull.
Okay.
But Warsaw 24-1, McCutcheon 24-3. McCutcheon got their second win over Snyder this year. Opened the season with a win over the Panthers, and then beat them at the regional by a final of 45-41. They were both close games, but McCutcheon is the team to advance. And also at Frankfurt, in Game 1, it is Hamilton Southeastern, 26-0. They stayed perfect with a dominant win over the Homestead Lady Spartans, 65-48. And for Homestead, just never in this. I think Hamilton Southeastern, the first score that I saw down my X feed was like 29-10 or something. It was just a dominant start for Hamilton Southeastern. And the Royals, I know the Royals.
Yeah, we do know that one.
They advanced to take on Valparaiso, who's 19-7 in Game 1 at Frankfurt. Now, 3A is where it's at because they're going to be at Huntington North for the semi-state, and you've got 2 area teams, both from the Northeast 8 Conference, with Norwell and Columbia City, both advancing with easy wins in the regional. Norwell beat East Noble 72-48. Columbia City blew out Lowell 73-29. And Norwell will take on Delta. Now, I got a little secret scouting report on Delta today.
Ooh.
Found out they've got a couple of gals that play on an AAU team where I've got a connection. And they said, got a very, very athletic 6-foot player that's just freakishly athletic, can get above the rim. And really good defender, really great athlete, but I still think Norwell's just too much.
Sure, yeah.
And they said that player will probably match up against Rossworm for Norwell, but I think Norwell's got other weapons, and Coach Eric Thornton, one of the best we've got in the girls' game, and so I think Norwell will win that game, and then Columbia City takes on Highland And Highland, thanks for coming. Hope you've got plans of what to do after you get beat by Columbia City.
You know their mascot?
Highland?
Highland.
The Highlanders.
Oh, that'd be good. I'm going to check here for you.
Oh, you don't know?
I'm pulling it up. I can only Google so fast.
Like we've got all day to sit here while you're Googling.
This is important stuff. It's the Highland Trojans.
Okay, nothing goes together there.
Okay.
All right, so Norwell, Columbia City, you'll be able to listen to right here at 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. It is our Parkview Sports Medicine High School basketball games of the week.
Awesome.
We'll be on the air 10 a.m. on Saturday, right after Jim Shevlin and Talkin' Sports. That means also golf with Jay Delsing is going to move to an earlier time slot at 7 a.m. on Saturday. So if you're a golf fan, just get up a little extra early, get some coffee on, enjoy Golf with Jay Delsing, our new Saturday morning program, 7 a.m., 10 a.m. It's high school basketball with Norwell taking on Delta, and then we'll have the noon game from Huntington North, which will be Columbia City versus Highland. And then should Norwell or Columbia City advance into that championship on Saturday night at Huntington North, we will be there to bring you all of the play-by-play. And it will be a bonus Parkview Sports Medicine high school basketball game of the week.
Oh, man, got to root for those teams because we want three in a week.
Friday, don't get confused by hearing Mastodons basketball on a Friday night because the Mastodons play Oakland.
Yes.
At the Gate Center, and we will have the coverage at 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. But it does not mean we will not have our Parkview Sports Medicine high school basketball postgame show, because after the games, we will be broadcasting from the Canterbury Pizza Hut and give you a full rundown of high school basketball scores. We will preview all of the semi-states. It'll be Adam Lundy, Eric Dudkevich, and me Friday night after the Mastodons take care of business against the Oakland Golden Grizzlies.
Should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to Friday night.
By the way, after Homestead lost to Hamilton Southeastern.
Yes.
I should, before I get into this, I should mention congratulations to Whitko and Eastside also advancing.
Yes.
And they're going to play each other. Of course, the draw was yesterday. Whitko, Eastside, they'll hook up at 10 a.m. at Logansport in game one of the 2A semi-state.
Awesome. Yeah, congratulations.
Okay, there you go. But yesterday it was announced on social media, Maya Epps made it official. Apparently, she has known this for some time, like a month and a half. She told her teammates, she's told some others in her close circle, but she made it public yesterday. She is now committed to Louisville.
All right, congratulations.
Go Cards.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yes, she wrote it on the whiteboard after the game, but it is now official and it is public that she is making her commitment to go to Louisville, and she will not do that until another year. She's part of the class of 2026, but she said every time she went and visited anywhere, she always made the comparison to Louisville. Louisville was always the team that seemed, or place that seemed to feel like home. And she said there was no reason to drag it out. She didn't want to lose her opportunity to join Louisville. And so she made her commitment official over the weekend.
Big congratulations. They'll be getting a great player in another year.
So Caitlin Clark, I was thinking about this over the weekend, and of course then it comes out in your update.
My update.
But I was thinking over the weekend about Caitlin Clark and the impact she has had in women's basketball, specifically the WNBA. And part of that was because I was watching Tiger Woods at the Genesis Invitational.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, he hosts that event, normally held at the Riviera Country Club, but because of the fires, it got moved, and it's at Torrey Pines.
Yep.
But he was on hand, not able to play, still physically just not able to give it a go. But I thought, Tiger Woods and Caitlin Clark, you could debate which one had a bigger impact on their respective sport.
Ooh.
And I started to think of the argument, if you were making it for Caitlin Clark and what she has done, not only for college basketball, which I think she's given women's college basketball a huge boost, and I think more people are watching women's college basketball, and some of the top games are being now broadcast on some of the main networks, like you're getting them on ABC. Yesterday, USC, UConn making it on ABC. You've got ESPN, not ESPN2 or ESPNU.
No.
That's covering some of the big matchups in women's college basketball. I think a lot of that is the Caitlin Clark effect. Just look at the Final Four ratings when she was a participant. Now, of course, Angel Reese happened to show up, so she thinks she's also part of the success. But in the WNBA, look at all the things that have happened since she's gotten into the league. Charter flights. Remember how they pushed it up? They made an announcement that they were going to go to charter flights, but all of a sudden it happened, and it happened overnight. It was Trump-like how quick that happened. Then you had games being played in bigger arenas so more fans could attend. They were no longer able to put these games on in 5,000 and 6,000 seat arenas. They had to go to 16,000, 17,000 seat arenas and still sold them out. The new TV money, it's going to be insane. There's going to be a lot more money being flown into the league, being poured into the league, and all of the players are going to be the beneficiary of that.
Yeah, check out this from the article from that quote where it's basically saying Caitlin Clark is invaluable. An economist at IU Columbus interviewed by the Indy Star recently calculated that Clark was responsible for $36 million in economic impact to the city of Indianapolis and almost 27% of the WNBA's economic activity for the 2024 season, including attendance, merch sales, and TV.
Well, and then, of course, what's been big since last season is the expansion of the WNBA, and there's people lining up wanting to get expansion teams into their market.
Detroit, Nashville,
and now Cleveland.
And Cleveland.
Cleveland announced over the weekend that the Cleveland Rockers are back.
All right, I like it. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right. That's where they got their name, and they were originally around the turn of the century, and Cleveland Rockers will be returning to the WNBA. I think it's in 2028. They got a couple of years before they get started.
Fantastic. And like you said, Nashville, they're having the summits coming there in honor of the Pat Summit. So WNBA expansion.
We got to take a break because we got the great Don Fischer, the Hall of Famer, the legend, the voice of the Indiana Hoosiers. We'll talk about where the Hoosiers are at. What about the coaching search? What about the latest couple of games? A big win against Michigan State and then a home loss to UCLA. Don Fischer, our 15 Minutes with Fish, is next here on the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Welcome back to the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix 4 to 6. I am Brett Rupp along with Adam Lundy. It is a big week because we've got, Purdue basketball. We've got Indiana basketball. The Pacers will be playing. Of course, Indiana basketball in a bit of a break right now, but it's not a break for our buddy Don Fischer. He'll be joining us here in just a moment. But coming up this weekend, high school basketball, the semi-state, and we now know who plays who and where they will play. And we will be at Huntington North on Saturday, bringing you both the early games of the semi-state. Remember, this is the format that used to be followed at the regional, where you've got games at 10 and noon. Champions return at 8, or winners return at 8 o'clock to compete for the championship. And that means this Saturday we'll have Norwell versus Delta at 10 a.m., followed by Columbia City and Highland at straight up noon. If either Norwell or Columbia City advance into the championship game, we'll have that for you at 8 o'clock on Saturday. So it's going to be a very busy, full Saturday right here at 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Of course, a reminder that coming up tonight, we've got Purdue basketball live 6:30, and then Inside Indiana basketball at 7:30. And, of course, it should be an enjoyable program with, our next guest hosting things. It is time for our 15 Minutes with Fish. It's presented by Hoopy Insurance Services. Legendary Hall of Fame broadcaster Don Fischer joining us. Well, Don, mixed results this week for the Indiana Hoosiers. They have a huge win. You feel like maybe this turns the corner. They go on the road to the Breslin Center at Michigan State and defeat the Spartans, and then come back and almost by an identical score fall at home to UCLA. Just overall, your thoughts on the ups and downs of the week. It's almost symbolic of the way the season has gone for IU.
Yeah, you're right about that. The good news is that Michigan State win was much needed because they had lost 5 in a row leading up to that matchup in East Lansing. And to win at the Breslin Center under those circumstances after having lost 5 straight ball games, that's saying something. You can say one thing, that Indiana did all the right things in that contest, including the coaching change, not the coaching change in regard to the resignation, but we're talking about the change in what the coaches decided they were going to do defensively in that game. About halfway through that first half, Indiana went to a zone defense because they were down, I think, I'm trying to remember when their biggest lead was. I think Michigan State's biggest lead was 12 points in the first half. Indiana went to a zone defense at around the 11-minute mark, and from that point forward, Indiana kind of controlled the ball game. In fact, they were up by 3 points at halftime, 32-29, and that zone did it. And the reason it did it was because Michigan State, who started out hot from the three-point line, couldn't shoot over the top of it. They were struggling big time, and Michigan State, for all practical purposes, is not a great three-point shooting team. They've got some three-point shooters, but they're not great at knocking down threes consistently. And Indiana basically emphasized that going in, saying, look, we're not going to let them beat us over the top. We're going to have to do it in other ways. And I thought the change to the zone was really, really effective. Against UCLA, not the same scenario. But back to the Michigan State game briefly, there were a couple of really nice performances in that contest. Obviously, Umar Ballo got back into the double-double vein, so to speak, with 14 points and 10 rebounds. Malik Renew had 19 and 12. That's the best rebounding we've seen out of Renew all season long. And to get those two guys to do that, what did they do differently? Well, they weren't playing the two of them at the same time. They had one guy in, one guy out, so they kept subbing those two players in and out, and both of them really flourished in that scenario. So it proves out that Indiana right now is a better basketball team if they're not playing both those bigs at one time. And obviously the win over Michigan State was huge for another reason, because it kept Tom Izzo from getting his 354th victory as in the Big Ten, a historical point, because Bob Knight had the record. And, of course, he tied Bob Knight with a game prior to that, and they were trying to knock off Indiana and make it a night in which Tom won his 354th game to take over the historical perspective of that statistic and winning his 354th game. So that's the most by any coach ever in the Big Ten. Tom finally got that this week with a win, but he didn't do it against Indiana, which would have been ironic had he.
Well, speaking of ironic, you've got a coach with primarily an NBA resume. You've got a coach that played his college ball under Bob Knight. The zone defense, did you see it coming? Did you know it was in the back pocket? I don't even know if IU's shown the zone this year.
Yeah, they had. They played it briefly. I'm trying to remember who against. I can't remember. I'm old. I can't remember those things anymore. But, yeah, they have played the zone maybe once or twice this year, but for very brief periods of time. But they threw it up against Michigan State, and it worked. And they tried to do it against UCLA the other night. I'm not sure it worked as well. Mick Cronin's a really good basketball coach. He's got some guys that understand what he likes to do. But they did a nice job in that ball game of making sure that Indiana's zone didn't really affect them like it did Michigan State. But the zone was definitely the factor against the Spartans, no question about that. And Indiana was banging in this ball game with UCLA, too. They just couldn't finish it once again, and they had a couple of looks at the end that could have made the difference, but it just didn't happen for them.
You know, that UCLA game, it seemed like they fought to just stay within shouting distance. I mean, they were always just a couple of points or a couple of possessions back, and you kept thinking all it's going to take is one little run, get the crowd ignited, and Indiana can take hold of this game, and it just never happened.
No, it just continues to be a frustrating season for this ball club. There's no question about it. One of the biggest problems, however, in the last three ball games that I see is that Indiana has not won the battle of the boards. They got beat by UCLA in that department on Friday, I should say, 36-33. And Indiana's not getting as many points off those second chance opportunities because the offensive rebounds aren't there. They only had 12 in the ball game against UCLA, but they were outboarded 36-33 in total. And here's the ironic part of this. In most of these ball games of late, Indiana has done a great job of taking care of the basketball. They're not turning the ball over hardly at all against most of these teams recently. So that's kept them in ball games. The one game, this is ironic too. The one game that they did not do out of the last 4 or 5 ball games this season, that they didn't have a good turnover margin, was the Purdue game, and they were in that one right to the end. So maybe they need to turn the ball over more. I don't know.
Here, you take it. I don't want it. You take it. Yeah, just give it away. It's been kind of an odd season statistically, and of course, Coach Woodson keeps saying, and still is saying, we've got to try to figure it out, or we're gonna, we got to get this thing figured out. But against UCLA, I don't know what stood out for you. I mean, Mackenzie Mbako, I thought, had a couple of chances there late, and it just seemed like when they got the possessions that could have been, I always call them money balls. It's like those shots that seem to be magnified, where they may be a 2-pointer, 3-pointer, but if they go in, you feel like it's a 6-pointer just because of where it's at in the game and the change and shift of momentum. And I just thought Indiana had a couple of those, just didn't get the shot.
No, and they shot it in this game. They were only 40% shooting the basketball from the field, that's not a good percentage. I guess the good news is that Indiana was battling out there, and they were able to kind of hold down UCLA to some degree in this contest and stay within shouting distance at least. I think the biggest lead that UCLA had was in the late portion of the first half, where they were up 13 points. And that's been another issue with this ball club this year, and we've seen it many, many times, of getting off to slow starts. First halves that they get down 13, 16, 20, that kind of thing, and then they have to fight back, and they exude a lot of energy in trying to fight back, and obviously you'd hope that energy would take place at the beginning of games rather than second halves or that kind of thing. The inconsistency of this basketball team, Brett, has been the biggest problem all season long, and it's not just with one player, it's the inconsistency with the entire team and how they play the basketball game. And until that gets changed, this probably isn't going to end. And here's I guess there is good news in this. They've got probably the weakest part of their schedule after this week. They play Purdue next Sunday, and then they start playing Penn State, Washington, Oregon, and Ohio State to close out the year. All of those games are winnable. The Purdue game at home should be a winnable game as well. So, honest to goodness, this is a ball club right now that's hanging on the precipice of just staying in the Big Ten tournament. Because if they right now are in 12th place, only 15 teams play in the Big Ten tournament this year. Indiana does not want to go there and not make the Big Ten tournament for the first time in history. So, because obviously this will be the first time that all teams don't play in the Big Ten tournament. And now with 18 teams, they had to cut it back some, and now there are 3 teams that will not make it. And Penn State, Northwestern, Washington, Rutgers, those teams are all right down there with only 5 or 4 or 3 wins this season. So Indiana's got 6 right now. All they got to do is win a couple more to guarantee that they'll make the Big Ten tournament, because that would be a disaster if they do not make the Big Ten tournament this season.
I think it's interesting because that was a point I was going to bring up, that Indiana's schedule, although on paper you think it's some of the weaker teams that they've got on their schedule, those are teams that are going to be fighting just to get a ticket to the Big Ten tournament. So so they're going to come hungry. They're going to have their best if they want to play in the Big Ten tournament, because 3 teams are left out.
Well, and here's the other thing. The Washington and the Oregon games are on the road. In Washington and Oregon, it's part of what will be a 5 or 6 day road trip out west before they play Ohio State to close out the regular season. So those are not going to be easy games, no matter how you look at it.
All right, Don, I got to figure out what's going on with Mike Woodson. I don't know when I turn on a game if I'm going to hear him before or after. I don't know what the story is with the coaches show or with the Inside Indiana Basketball. You can tell me what you know, because coming up tonight, it'll be a while before, by the way, we find out about pregame, postgame, because I think Indiana must have allowed their kids to go on spring break. Usually you don't get to do that in college, but this week it seems like that's pretty much what they're doing. But tonight, it is Inside Indiana Basketball. What is expected on the show?
Well, just so you know, Brett, Coach Woodson is no longer doing pregame shows, postgame shows, or the talk shows with me.
Okay.
It will be assistant coaches. It'll be assistant coach Kenny Hunter will be on tonight's show for Inside IU Basketball at 7:05. We will have another show next Monday night, and next Monday night we'll have another assistant coach on that show. But pregame and postgame and the talk shows he no longer wishes to do, based on the fact that obviously he's not. I don't know what he's unhappy with me about, but he's not happy with me, obviously, if he's not going to do those shows. And at some point, he's not going to be doing some press conferences either after ball games. I think his rule has been, although he's done the last two post-game press conferences, I think his rule is generally players will not be on games that are lost, but there will be a coach. It'll probably be him in most cases. If they win, it'll be players being on those press conferences. That's what I was told. Whether that holds or not, we'll just have to find out.
I think you're taking it personally. Just because you happen to be the guy that hosts the show, I just think he just wants to say less.
That may be the case. I can't say one way or the other. All I can tell you is of all the things that he has responsibilities to do, he's not doing those with me.
Don, I'll invite you back next week. I got no problem talking to you.
I appreciate it, Brett.
All right, so show tonight, and we'll have it on the air at 7:30 after the Purdue show, and that'll be right here at 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. And then the big one with Purdue, Indiana, after a 9-day break, and that comes up on Sunday with a 1:30 tip-off. Kind of a confusing time. That's not a normal tip time. 1:30 on Sunday. That means 12:30. You've got the pregame show minus Mike Woodson.
You got it.
Hey, sounds good. Talk to you next Monday. Have a great week and enjoy your extra time off.
Thanks, Brett.
All right. That's Don Fischer joining us here on the Sports Rush. It's, of course, our 15 Minutes with Fish every Monday, presented by Hoopy Insurance Services. We'll take a break. We're going to come back. It's the Sports Rush on a Monday on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. 260-447-8500, 260-447-8500. Your thoughts, questions, comments, or suggestions on the Parkview Sports Medicine text line. Always like to hear from you. Always great to have a chance to visit with Don Fischer. Our 15 Minutes with Fish every Monday at the same time, around 5:20. And one thing we didn't have a chance to cover with Don Fischer, but I did hear Jim Coyle bring it up earlier today, is this new tournament that's going to be part of postseason basketball for, well, I guess the Big Ten and some of the power conferences. There were teams that didn't want to get involved with the NIT, didn't feel that it was glamorous enough. And, of course, you've got some mid-majors that had automatic invites to the NIT. And so there have been, historically, Indiana among them, teams that were from power conferences that turned down invitations to be in the National Invitational Tournament. Well, Fox and AEG got together last year and decided, we'll have a tournament, but we're going to force them to play. We're going to get the conferences on board so that their members will commit to our postseason tournament, and we will get these teams to come play. And it leads to the question, if Indiana ends up in that position where they are receiving an invite to the tournament in Las Vegas, and to kind of give you the details of what's happening out in Las Vegas, it's all going to be played at two venues, the MGM Grand Garden Arena and T-Mobile Arena. It's for 16 teams, takes place over a 1-week stretch. And so you probably would have a game almost every other day and maybe back-to-back days at some point during the week. And it's specifically to be sure that Big Ten, Big 12, and Big East teams, all leagues that are carried by Fox, will have 2 automatic entries among the 16-team field. And the other teams are going to be selected by committee. Well, I guess the question, if Indiana gets an invite to this, And the big question is, if you're running this tournament, why would you want Indiana? But if they do get an invite, I don't know that they can get out of it. And I think it's kind of silly for Fox or AEG to even consider Indiana, because I think if a coach is leaving or if a coach has already been fired, that should take that team off the board. You shouldn't have to have an interim coach to coach a third level, or if you want to consider it a second level postseason tournament. It's not the NCAA tournament. It is, what are they calling it? The College Basketball Crown is what they've come up with as a name. 16-team tournament out in Las Vegas. But I guess the question, and it's really twofold. Number one, do you think there's a chance that they would invite Indiana? Now, let's first talk about where the Big Ten standings are right now, because you've got Indiana currently sitting in 12th place. Now, how many will the NCAA take? I think it's not going to get past 8, 9, 10 would be unbelievable. And a lot would have to happen for it to get to 10. Well, then you've got the NIT, who would accept bids. What if Indiana turns down a bid to the NIT, but then is forced to go into the Crown because of their obligations to the Big Ten and to the network that basically pays the most money to the Big Ten to cover Big Ten games? I mean, it's, you look right now and you think Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Wisconsin, Maryland, UCLA, Illinois. I mean, they're all locks, right? They're in the NCAA tournament field. I mean, they'd have to probably have an offer for the rest of the season, and even then they might still make it.
Right.
So that's 7. Nebraska, Oregon, Ohio State, USC is the next group. Now, I'd have to look at all of the qualifiers they review, like quadrant 1 wins, quadrant 2 wins. Look at those records, see where they're at in the net. But Nebraska, Oregon, Ohio State, and USC. And Ohio State's 15-11 overall. I mean, there's a big cutoff with the overall one-loss record once you get past Oregon. So that's 9 deep. I can't see it going any further than 9. Ohio State, USC, IU. I don't see Minnesota being a big draw for this. Iowa, possibly. Rutgers, maybe. But now you're talking about the team that right now is in jeopardy of making the Big Ten tournament. Are you going to take a team that doesn't even make their conference tournament and invite them to a national postseason tournament? So Indiana could be on the bubble. They could be a team that is looked at by this committee. Because remember, it's not just 2 teams. It's 2 teams that are guaranteed spots in the field, and the committee chooses the rest. They might want to go with 4 or 5 teams for the Big Ten. If the NCAA cuts off at Oregon and Ohio State doesn't end up in the NIT, then you could have Ohio State, USC, IU, Iowa, and if Rutgers makes the Big Ten tournament as the 15th seed, they could still probably play postseason basketball. How amazing is that?
Gotta love it. Gotta love any chance you have to get into the postseason, man.
Do you?
I don't know.
Is that sarcasm, I think?
Yeah, maybe
because,
a little.
I mean, Indiana is not going to love it when they've got a lame duck coach. And
you kind of just want the season to wrap up at that point if that's your
Trey
situation.
Galloway and Anthony Leal, 2 departing seniors, are they going to be so pumped up to end their career with a crown title of a new tournament that's never existed before? I don't think so.
And are players like Umar Ballo and Mackenzie Mbako going to be more interested in getting to NBA scouting?
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me they might want the trip to Las Vegas so they can hang out at the casino. Maybe that's what Indiana will want. Remember the rumors about hanging out at the casino in the Bahamas. Maybe Indiana just wants to get out there so they can put a little something on red. But yeah, it's kind of an odd situation. But I don't know how excited I am about this tournament, because I think once they put the field together, the real question is who gets to the NIT then? Yeah. Does the NIT become a watered-down mid-major tournament? I mean,
And then if you think about that, if the NIT becomes watered down, think about the CBI and the CIT.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it just gets it's a trickle-down effect.
The problem with the CBI and the CIT is it's somewhat of a pay-to-play. You know, those tournaments are put on primarily by the teams that play in the tournament. And so most of the schools have to invest to get their and they get an invite. It's not like, hey, I'll pay. We were 7-22 this year, but I'll, you know, it's not like that. But
right,
you get an invite, and then you have to make a decision whether you're willing to pay an entry fee to get into that tournament. And then the entry fee is much larger if you want to host games in that tournament. And that's why last year the CIT was such a mess with not enough teams that wanted to host because they didn't want to pay the significant increase in cost of what it took to be a home team. That's why they went with 4-team pods, where you have one team that hosts and 3 others that were visitors, and they would have like 3 games being played at one site. And even that didn't work. So I don't know what it does as, you know, the trickle down, because all of a sudden a team that in a mid-major conference may have finished 7-11 and a 500 record, do they really want to pay to put their team through a postseason tournament? Most don't. The budgets just aren't there. And that's part of the problem that these tournaments have had in rounding out a field. But when you talk about this crown, that's, you know, dealing with Fox Sports, you've got a television deal. So I'm sure all of the entries, it's not going to cost these teams to play in it. The question is just, are they inspired enough to go play in it? I don't know if it's a big enough event. Up until this weekend, I never heard a person talking about this event.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot about it either. So I think it's up to the event planners to make it big enough for people to want to compete and compete hard.
260-447-8500. Give us your thoughts on the Parkview Sports Medicine text line. What do you think of the Basketball Crown 16-team tournament that'll take place March 31st through April 6th? So it also is the week primarily between the Elite Eight and the Final Four.
Okay.
That's, you know, so because you don't have those weeknight games, that's when most of the games are going to be played. So, you know, there's a window there. You usually have the NIT championship at some point that week.
Right.
But Fox is banking on the fact that they can put together a better field and you know, perhaps get the nation's interest and get some ratings and milk college basketball for its last drop.
Right. I think it really does. Like you say, it comes down to the matchups that they can provide, make them exciting enough matchups for people to tune in. And then, you know, first game of the event, you got to have both teams giving it their all, or else it's just going to be a bunch of lackadaisical basketball that nobody wants to see.
I'll give you a matchup.
Okay,
and just
give me
see
one.
how excited you are about this.
All right, I'll give you a 1 through 10.
Indiana versus Utah.
I give it maybe like a 6.5.
That's a pretty good rating out of 10.
Yeah, but like I said, it'd have to be a good game. Like if I know that the Hoosiers are going to go in there like they've been in some of these games, like, you know, where they've been blown out, I'm not going to be interested. But hey, Utah 22-4, that's a good. Oh no, that's Utah State.
Yeah, I was going to say
you threw me off.
Utah is 6-8 in the Big 12. They are 14-11 overall.
Okay, I might have to bump it down to maybe
They're
like
1-6 on the road. Yeah,
might bump it down to maybe like.
But
a 5.
I'm looking at a team that's going to finish at about the same spot in their conference that Indiana would finish in theirs.
Right.
Utah at 6-8 would be the equivalent.
One of those two kind of automatic after the tournament. So I don't know.
260-447-8500. We'll take a break. It is the Sports Rush on a Monday on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Back final time on the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix 4 to 6. Coming up tonight, we've got Purdue basketball with Coach Matt Painter. That will be at 6:30. And then we have Inside IU basketball with a coach that is still yet to be named. Can't believe Don Fischer shared that Mike Woodson apparently has shut him off or something. I cannot believe it is anything personal.
What could possibly be personal?
I know it's like like Fisch said, Apparently he's got an issue with me because he won't do the pregame, postgame on the radio shows, and he won't do the radio show. So he said he was informed of that it was Mike Woodson's choice not to continue to do that. And Don felt it was a little personal because he said he's still doing the media in the press conferences, but he won't get on and join me for a question or two. And I can't imagine that. Don Fischer's not that tough of a guy, And in fact, we were talking, Jamie, our engineer here in the building, I was talking to him earlier and said, in college athletics, the athletes are performers. I mean, they are taking the stage. They are performing. You are buying a ticket for a good performance. And if you go to a show that you expect a certain performance and you do not get it, and the reason you do not get it is because the talent that you paid to go see didn't give you the effort that you were expecting, you're going to be upset and there's going to be criticism. And I said, that's just something, even though they're 18, 19, 20 years old, they have to understand and hold themselves accountable that there are people that are making financial investments into them. And there's even more now that the NIL exists and there's expectations. You can't take a day off. You can't have an off day as far as effort goes. And so, I understand some of the criticism, but the criticism is generally fact-based. In other words, you can say a guy's in a slump. That's not saying he's a bad person or a bad kid or, but a guy that, goes 3 for 19 from three-point land over a course of 3 or 4 games, he's in a slump. It is what it is. And you got to have thick enough skin to be, we're so protective of today's youth, but come on. Sometimes you got to accept that you'll get the praise, but if it doesn't go well, you're performing on a stage and people will call out exactly what they saw in that performance. It's like if they were singers and they got on stage and somebody was off key. Guess what I'd say? Say they were singing off key. You call it like it is, but you don't go out of your way to criticize the human part of it. Oh, they're just lazy. They're not doing the job getting their shots up. That's why right now they can't shoot. You don't go that far. You don't talk about things, but you can say that someone needs to get themselves out of a current slump that they're in where they've only hit 3 of their last 19 three-point shots. That's okay. That happens. 260-447-8500. Always a pleasure to hear from you. Thanks to Don Fischer for being our guest today. Our 15 Minutes with Fisch presented each and every week by Hoopy Insurance Services. Back tomorrow 4 to 6 doing it again. It's the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.